At exactly 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my landlord, and it said, "Pack your things and leave now. Don't ask questions." Half asleep, I stared at the screen, thinking it had to be a mistake. When I asked what was going on, he replied, "You'll thank me by morning." I thought he'd lost his mind, but a few hours later, when the sun came up, I realized he might have just saved my life. Hey everyone, my name is Ava, and this is the story of the strangest night of my life, the night my landlord told me to run, and I didn't understand why until it was almost too late. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for more real and mysterious stories like this one, and comment where you're watching from. Let's get into it. It had been just over 3 months since I moved into that apartment. I was 26, working remotely as a graphic designer, finally living on my own for the first time. The building wasn't fancy. It was an old 3-story complex on the edge of town, but it was quiet and affordable. And for me, that was perfect. My landlord, Mr. Grant, lived across the courtyard in another unit. He was the kind of man who seemed intimidating at first glance. Stern face, salt and pepper hair, always dressed neatly, but he was fair and reliable. He fixed things fast and didn't bother me unless it was important. I figured I'd lucked out. That night had started like any other. I'd finished work around midnight, made myself tea, and curled up on the couch to watch a movie. My cat, Pepper, was asleep next to me. The TV cast a soft blue glow across the room. Everything felt normal and safe. I eventually dozed off halfway through the movie, wrapped in a blanket, with the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Then my phone vibrated against the coffee table. I blinked, half awake, and reached for it, squinting at the bright screen. A message from Mr. Grant glowed across the top. "Pack your things and leave now. Don't ask questions." I frowned, rereading it twice. What kind of message was that? I thought maybe he'd sent it to the wrong tenant, or maybe something was wrong with the building, like a gas leak or fire. I texted him back, "Mr. Grant, what's going on? Is everything okay?" The reply came instantly. "I'm serious, Ava. Leave now. You'll thank me by morning." That second text sent a chill down my spine. I sat up, heart pounding a little faster. Pepper stirred on the couch, sensing my sudden tension. I checked the clock. 3:02 a.m. The rain had stopped, and the building was silent. My first instinct was to think it was some weird misunderstanding. Mr. Grant was older. Maybe he was confused or sleep texting, but there was something about the tone of his message that didn't feel random. It felt urgent. I got up and looked around my apartment. Everything looked perfectly fine. No smoke, no smell, no sound. I checked the stove, the outlets, even the hallway through the peephole. Nothing. The building was dark and still. I unlocked my phone again and called him. No answer. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. Then I texted, "I'm not leaving in the middle of the night unless you tell me why." No reply. That's when Pepper jumped off the couch, tail puffed, and started hissing toward the living room window. My stomach dropped. I turned slowly. The blinds were down, but through the narrow gap between them, I could see the faint reflection of the streetlight and what looked like movement outside, a quick shadow crossing the courtyard. I froze, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe a raccoon, maybe the neighbor getting home late. But then Pepper bolted down the hallway and hid under the bed. Something wasn't right. I grabbed my phone again and texted my sister, Nina. She was a light sleeper. Within seconds, she called me. "Why are you awake at 3 in the morning?" she mumbled. I explained everything, the texts, the silence, and now the movement outside. She instantly woke up. "Ava, that's not normal. You should leave, right now. Don't wait." "I don't even know where I'd go," I said, pacing across the living room. "And I'm not leaving all my stuff behind because of a weird text. I'm sure there's a logical reason." "Ava," she said firmly, "please listen to me. If your landlord told you to leave, he had a reason." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Maybe, but I don't want to overreact. I'll check the building in the morning." She groaned in frustration. "Just keep your phone on loud and lock your doors, okay?" "Always do," I said. After the call ended, I walked over to the window again, lifted one blind slightly, and peeked outside. The courtyard was empty. The streetlight flickered faintly, shining over wet pavement. Nothing moved. I took a deep breath and decided to go back to sleep. But just as I turned off the lamp, another message buzzed on my phone. This time, it wasn't from Mr. Grant. It was from an unknown number. The message read, "Don't look outside again." My throat went dry, and my whole body went cold. I stared at the phone screen, heart hammering, realizing I might not be as alone as I thought. And that was the moment I knew something terrible was about to happen. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, staring at that message. My phone's blue light made my hands shake. "Don't look outside again." The words didn't make sense, but they filled me with the kind of fear that hits your chest and spreads fast. Someone knew what I had just done. Someone had seen me. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was a prank. Someone from the building saw me peek through the blinds and decided to mess with me. Maybe Mr. Grant was behind it, and this was some weird way to scare tenants into following his rules. But the way the message appeared seconds after I looked out the window didn't feel random. It felt targeted. I locked my front door again, then checked the deadbolt twice. Pepper was still hiding under the bed, refusing to come out. I turned on every light in the apartment, even the small one over the stove, just to feel like I wasn't trapped in the dark. The hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock were the only sounds breaking the silence. I texted my sister again. Got another message. This one said, "Don't look outside again." She called immediately. "What? From who?" she asked, her voice tense. "I don't know," I whispered. "It wasn't from Mr. Grant's number. It's a different one. Call 911, she said firmly. I hesitated. I don't even know what to tell them. There's no proof of anything, just texts. What if it's nothing? "Ava, please," she said. "Someone texted you at 3 a.m. telling you not to look out your window. That's not nothing." Her words sank in, but before I could reply, I heard it. A sound from the hallway outside my door. A slow, dragging noise. It stopped, then started again, like someone was pushing something heavy across the floor. My breath caught in my throat. I lowered my voice. "Nina, there's someone outside my apartment. Get somewhere safe," she whispered quickly. "Lock yourself in the bathroom. I'm calling the police right now." I moved quietly toward the hallway, my bare feet silent against the wood floor. The noise outside grew softer, but then a new sound followed, a quiet thump against my door. I froze. It wasn't a knock. It was more like someone pressing their hand against it. Then came a whisper, a man's voice, low and drawn out. "Ava, open up." Every muscle in my body locked. The voice didn't sound like Mr. Grant. It didn't sound like anyone I knew. It was too calm, too steady. I didn't answer. I didn't move. The voice came again. "I know you're awake." The words slithered under my skin. I backed away from the door, clutching my phone like it could protect me. My heart was pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message, this time from Mr. Grant. "Do not open the door. Don't speak. Stay quiet." That confirmed everything I feared. Someone was really out there, and my landlord knew. The next minute felt like an hour. The whispering stopped. I heard the faint click of my door handle being tested, then silence. A few seconds later, footsteps moved away, slow and deliberate, fading down the hall. I ran to the bedroom, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely text. I messaged Mr. Grant again. "What's happening? Who is that?" He replied instantly. "They broke into one of the empty units earlier. They're still in the building. I called the police, but it'll take time. Don't make a sound." The room suddenly felt smaller. I backed into the corner, trying not to cry, trying to listen for any hint of movement. From outside, faint footsteps echoed again, this time heavier, closer. The creak of the floorboards told me whoever it was had come back. I could hear them stop right outside my door again. Then, the unmistakable sound of metal scraping against wood. They were trying to pry the lock. I grabbed my phone and texted my sister again. "He's trying to get in," she replied immediately. "The police are on their way. Just stay hidden. Don't move." My chest tightened. Every second felt endless. The scraping stopped, and then, for a full minute, everything went silent. I could hear only my own breath. Then came the softest knock, just once. followed by the sound of someone laughing quietly, a low, unsettling chuckle that sent a chill through my entire body. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. Pepper hissed from under the bed, and then, suddenly, there was another text from Mr. Grant. "They're leaving. Stay put until morning." I wanted to believe him, but I didn't dare unlock the door. I stayed where I was, crouched in that corner, gripping my phone, eyes fixed on the doorknob. Hours passed like that. The night stretched on, silent except for the occasional creak of the old building and the wind against the windows. At some point, exhaustion took over. My eyes grew heavy, my body tense but drained. I must have dozed off sitting upright, because when I woke up, faint sunlight was coming through the blinds. It was 6:10 a.m. I slowly stood, heart still racing from the memory of the night before. My phone was dead, so I plugged it in, waiting for the screen to light up. As soon as it did, I saw one last unread message from Mr. Grant, sent around 5:40 a.m. It said, "Don't open your door until I get there." And right after reading that, I heard it. A single, deliberate knock, the same one from last night. But this time, it came after sunrise. The knock at the door came again, louder this time. Sunlight filled the cracks between the blinds, but that didn't make it feel any safer. My heart was pounding, and my first thought was that the person from last night had come back. The memory of that whisper, that calm, sickening voice calling my name, came rushing back all at once. I stayed perfectly still, hoping whoever it was would just leave. Then I heard another sound, footsteps in the hallway, heavy and purposeful. Whoever was out there wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. I leaned closer to the door, listening carefully, and that's when I heard my landlord's voice call out, "Ava, it's me. It's Mr. Grant. Don't open yet. I just want you to answer me." I hesitated. It sounded like him, but I didn't trust my own ears after the night I'd had. My voice cracked as I asked, "How do I know it's really you?" There was a short pause. Then he said, "Your rent check bounced last month because you wrote the wrong date. Remember? I came by to tell. You it cleared later that day. Only you and I know that." It was true. My heart eased slightly, but my hands were still shaking as I unlocked the door. I opened it just enough to see him standing there, the same man I'd rented from for months, still in his flannel shirt and dark jeans, looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. The hallway behind him was empty. He held a flashlight in one hand and a crowbar in the other. I blinked, confused. "What's going on?" I asked. He didn't waste a second. "You need to get out of here right now. Grab your things. The police are already on their way." "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Was someone really in the building last night?" He nodded. "Two men. They broke into one of the vacant units on the first floor, and when I went to check the noise, they ran upstairs. I didn't want to shout and alert them that I'd seen them, so I texted you instead. I thought you'd listen and leave right away." His voice cracked slightly as he said it, the guilt clear in his tone. I stared at him in disbelief, trying to process it all. They were here? In this building? He nodded again, scanning the hallway as he spoke. "They tried to force open 2 apartment doors last night. I heard one of them mention your name. The words hit me like a punch. My knees felt weak. My name? How would they know my name?" "I don't know," he said, "but we can figure that out later. Right now, you need to leave." I went back into my apartment, shoving my laptop, wallet, and Pepper's carrier into a tote bag. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and every sound, the zip of my bag, the creak of the floor, made me jump. I could still hear the echo of those whispers in my head. When I came back into the hallway, Mr. Grant motioned for me to stay behind him as we walked down the stairs. The morning air outside was cold and still, the kind of quiet that feels heavier than silence. The parking lot was empty except for his truck and my car. As we reached the front steps, he suddenly stopped and put his arm out to block me. "Wait," he whispered. Across the lot, near the line of trees that bordered the property, 2 figures stood partially hidden in the shadows. They were tall, both wearing hooded jackets, their faces impossible to see from where we stood. One of them lifted his head slightly, and even from a distance, I could feel his gaze lock on us. Back inside, Mr. Grant ordered quietly. We retreated to the lobby, locking the door behind us. He pulled out his phone and called the police again, explaining that the intruders were still on the property. I pressed my back against the wall, my pulse racing. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why were they saying my name?" He shook his head, rubbing a hand over his face. "I think they've been watching the building. One of the maintenance guys I fired last month might have told them which units were occupied. You live alone, and your lights are on late. Maybe they thought you'd be easy." The thought made my stomach turn. Within minutes, sirens grew louder in the distance. The two figures outside bolted into the woods the moment the police cars turned onto the street. Mr. Grant and I ran to the door and pointed toward the trees. Officers sprinted across the lot, flashlights sweeping through the branches, but the men had vanished. When it was finally safe, I sat on the curb with Pepper's carrier in my lap, my hands still trembling. Mr. Grant stood nearby, talking to Officer Riley, explaining everything that had happened through the night. The sounds, the messages, the break-ins. He handed over his phone to show the texts he'd sent me. When the officer came over to talk to me, I could barely speak. He crouched beside me and said gently, "You did the right thing by staying quiet. If you'd opened that door, they probably would have forced their way in. You're lucky your landlord was paying attention." I turned to look at Mr. Grant, who gave a small nod. His expression wasn't proud or relieved, just tired, like someone who'd been carrying a burden all night. I thanked him softly. "I thought you were crazy," I admitted. He gave a small, weary smile. "I've been called worse, but I'd rather you think I'm crazy than see you get hurt." For the first time since the night began, I felt safe, but deep inside, I also knew something had changed. That morning, as the police searched the property, I realized that safety wasn't something I could take for granted anymore. The world outside my window had looked peaceful for months, but it only took one night, one message at 3 a.m., to show me how fragile that peace really was. The police spent most of that morning combing through the property, checking every corner of the lot and the wooded area behind the building. I sat on the back of an ambulance with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the flashing lights reflect off the windows of my apartment. It still didn't feel real. Just hours earlier, I'd been asleep on my couch, and now my home felt like the last place I'd ever want to be again. Mr. Grant stood beside one of the officers, pointing toward the tree line. His clothes were still wrinkled from the night before, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I could tell the police were asking the same questions that had been spinning in my mind. Who were those men, and why had they been targeting me? When Officer Riley finally approached me, his tone was calm and measured. "Miss Sinclair, we found footprints behind the building. 2 sets. Looks like they were watching the complex for at least a few nights. We also found some cigarette butts and food wrappers. Whoever they were, they'd been camping out near the trees for a while." I felt my stomach tighten. "They were watching us?" He nodded. "Seems that way. We're checking nearby cameras now, but it's possible they'd been planning this for some time." As he spoke, another officer came over carrying a small evidence bag. Inside was a cheap black phone. "We found this near one of the windows," he said. "Looks like a prepaid phone. We'll check for messages." The moment I saw it, my heart sank. "That's the kind of phone that texted me," I said quietly. The number wasn't saved, but the timing. It matched exactly when I looked out my window. Mr. Grant turned sharply. "Wait, they texted you?" I nodded, holding out my phone. I'd shown him before, but now it felt different, knowing there might be proof. "I got 2 messages," I explained. "The first one from you, and the second from an unknown number. It said, 'Don't look outside again.' That was right before I saw the shadow." The officer's face hardened. "That means one of them had your number." I stared at him, my heart sinking even lower. "But how could they? I don't give out my number to anyone here. Only the landlord has it." Mr. Grant frowned, thinking hard. "You put it on your rental paperwork. I keep that locked in my office filing cabinet, but..." His voice trailed off. He looked toward the corner of the building where his office window sat cracked open, its lock broken. "They must have broken in last night before I caught them." The realization hit both of us at once. They hadn't just been watching. They'd gone through my personal information. They knew exactly who I was, what apartment I lived in, and even my phone number. The officer turned to another patrolman. Run that phone as soon as possible. I want to know if they contacted anyone else in this building. While they worked, Mr. Grant sat down beside me on the curb. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air was cold and smelled faintly of pine and damp earth. Then he sighed heavily and said, I got a call last night from one of the tenants on the first floor. They heard noises, thought maybe kids were breaking in. I came to check, and that's when I saw them near the back window. They had flashlights, tools. They were prying open a frame. I didn't want to startle them, so I stepped back and called the police. But before I could finish dialing, one of them saw me and ran. That's when I texted you to leave. I turned toward him. You could have been hurt. He shook his head. I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about how your unit's right above theirs. If they went up there next, his voice broke slightly. I didn't want to take that chance. As the sun climbed higher, the officers finished their search. They didn't find the men, but what they did find chilled me even more. In the woods behind the property, under a pile of leaves, they discovered a backpack filled with stolen items, wallets, phones, jewelry, and a small camera with a cracked lens. When they turned it on, there were videos recorded inside people's homes. Some were clearly taken from windows, others from door cracks. One clip showed my own apartment. The video was grainy, but I recognized my couch, my cat, and the soft light of my living room lamp. It was recorded 2 nights before. I felt sick. My hands started shaking uncontrollably. They were inside? I asked, my voice barely audible. No, the officer said, shaking his head. It looks like they filmed through your window from outside. But that means they were close enough to see everything you were doing. My knees went weak. I sat down on the step again, trying to breathe. Mr. Grant placed a hand on my shoulder, steady and reassuring. They're gone now, he said softly, and the police will find them. You're safe, Ava. But I didn't feel safe, knowing that someone had stood outside my window at night, recording me, studying my life without me even realizing. It changed everything. My home, which had once been my peaceful space, now felt invaded. An hour later, Officer Riley returned with the results from the phone. We confirmed it, he said. The number that texted you came from this burner phone we found near the woods. The men must have seen you look out the window and wanted to scare you into staying quiet. It wasn't a warning to help you. It was a threat. The truth made my blood run cold. The same message that had made me freeze in fear was meant to trap me inside, to stop me from escaping or calling for help. Mr. Grant exhaled slowly. Good thing you didn't listen. I nodded, my throat tight. I almost did, I whispered. If you hadn't texted me when you did, I would have just gone back to sleep. He gave a tired smile. Then I guess I was right when I said you'd thank me by morning. It wasn't a joke, but there was something comforting in his tone. The relief of 2 people who had survived a night neither of them could fully explain yet. As the police wrapped up and the sun rose higher, I looked up at my apartment window one last time. From the outside, it looked so normal, just another home on an ordinary street. But now I knew better. Safety can vanish quietly, without warning, and sometimes the only thing that stands between you and disaster is a single message at the right time. And in that moment, I silently thanked my landlord, not just for his warning, but for reminding me that sometimes trust can be the thing that saves you. The next few days passed in a blur. Even after the police left and everything seemed to calm down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every passing car, every faint sound outside my window made me tense up. My apartment didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a memory of safety that had been torn apart. I stayed with my sister Nina for a few nights after that morning. She drove over as soon as she heard what happened, her face pale with shock as she hugged me tight. You're lucky, she said quietly. I don't even want to think about what could have happened. I didn't answer because I'd already thought about it more than I wanted to. At her place, I barely slept. My phone would light up with every notification, and each time, my heart would jump. I'd turn it over, half expecting to see another strange message. But there were none. Just normal life moving on, while mine still felt stuck in that terrifying night. On the third day, I went back to my apartment to get the rest of my things. The front door had a new lock, and there was police tape across the courtyard. Mr. Grant was standing near the stairs, talking with one of the officers. When he saw me, he gave a small, tired smile. "You holding up okay?" he asked. I nodded, trying to. He rubbed his hands together, looking out across the parking lot. "They're still searching the area. They think those men may have hit other apartment complexes in nearby towns. The police found a car they ditched a few miles out. It was full of stolen property." Hearing that made me shiver. The idea that people like that had been planning something for weeks, maybe even months, and I'd been living right in the middle of it. It made my skin crawl. "Did they say why they picked me?" I asked quietly. Mr. Grant shook his head. "Probably because you lived alone. Easy target. That's what these guys look for. But you got lucky. You really did." I looked down at my hands, still fidgeting with my keys. "No," I said softly. "I didn't get lucky. You paid attention. You trusted your gut. I didn't." He sighed. "You trusted logic. Nothing wrong with that. Most people wouldn't leave their home over a strange text at 3 a.m. You're not the one who should feel guilty here." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then I noticed something on his arm, a small scratch running along his wrist. "Did you get hurt?" I asked. He shrugged it off. "One of them swung at me when I was trying to stop them from getting into the lower unit. Caught me off guard. Nothing serious." I looked at him, realizing how close he'd come to being in real danger, too. "You could have been killed," I said. He gave a faint smile. "Maybe, but I couldn't just let them hurt anyone. I've lived here for 20 years. These people are like family to me. You are too, in a way." The sincerity in his voice hit me harder than I expected. For months, I'd thought of him as just a landlord, the guy who fixed my sink or sent reminders about rent. But that morning, standing in the quiet of that courtyard, I realized he was something else entirely. A protector. Someone who cared even when he didn't have to. A few weeks later, I found a new apartment across town. It wasn't far, but it was newer, brighter, and surrounded by people. For a long time, I avoided unpacking, fully. I kept my phone next to my bed every night, the brightness turned up, the sound on high. Every time it buzzed, I froze for a second before checking. Then, one morning, about a month after moving, I got a text. It was from Mr. Grant. "Just checking in. Hope the new place is treating you well. Stay safe." I smiled for the first time in what felt like weeks. I typed back, "Thank you for everything. I'll never forget what you did for me." He replied a minute later with just one line, "Told you you'd thank me by morning." Reading those words made me laugh through the tears. It was the same line he'd sent that night, the one that had confused me, scared me, even annoyed me at first. But now, it felt different. It wasn't just a warning. It was a reminder that sometimes the people you least expect to protect you are the ones who'll risk the most to keep you safe. The police never did catch the men who broke into the building, but I stopped letting that thought consume me. Life slowly went back to normal. I got back into work, started seeing friends again, and even found small bits of peace in my new routine. But I learned something that will stay with me forever. Fear doesn't always come with a loud knock or a scream. Sometimes it comes quietly, through a simple text message that changes everything. Now, whenever I get that gut feeling that something isn't right, I listen, because that night taught me that instincts exist for a reason, and ignoring them can cost more than you ever imagine. A few months later, I stopped by the old complex to drop off a thank you card for Mr. Grant. His truck was still parked out front, but when I knocked on his office door, it was empty. The building manager told me he'd decided to retire and move closer to his family out of state. He left a small note taped to the door. It said, "Take care of yourself, Ava. The world's not always kind, but it's still worth trusting the good people in it." I stood there for a long moment, reading it twice before smiling. For the first time since that night, I didn't feel afraid. I felt grateful. When I drove away, I passed my old apartment. The new tenants had hung curtains in the window, bright yellow ones. The place looked warm again, full of life. And for a moment, I realized that maybe that's how healing works. You don't forget the darkness, but you learn to see the light again. If this story made your heart race or made you think twice about trusting your instincts, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more true, mysterious stories and comment where you're watching from. Sometimes, one simple message can save a life, and I'll always be thankful mine came at 3 a.m.